I am going to talk about when policies fail, a survivor's testimony from inside the Texas Annual Conference administration within the United Methodist denomination. I am a survivor of sexual assault from within the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist denomination. This is not just my story. It is a story about what happens when the systems that claim to protect us fail us. And today I am sharing this because silence protects the institution, but truth protects the vulnerable. I am also going to read some of the policies also for candidates. Here it is. I'm going to read 2 pages out of the Residency Program Handbook of 2023 for candidates preparing for ordination in the Texas Annual Conference within the United Methodist denomination in Houston, Texas. And I'm going to start where I left off on page 15. Meeting form for the first on-site visit by RET. Resident's name, location, and date of visit. Introduction. Open with prayer and ask everyone to introduce themselves. LCT feedback. The LCT won't have much feedback yet, but the chairperson shouldn't share what has happened so far in the meeting and what the goals are for future meetings. Is there anything in particular that we will be looking to evaluate? Have there been any concerns raised yet? And one question comes to mind, because it says here, open with prayer and ask everyone to introduce themselves. So if it's important that you all know each other's name and who each other is, why is it in the supervised visitation that the visiting parents do not have any idea who the church staff are that are present at the United Methodist churches that are allowing the domestic relations office to have supervised visitations? Because there are church staff that show up at the visitations. So why is it that the parents do not know who the staff is? They don't have name tags. They don't introduce themselves. Why is that? And you follow parents to the restroom. I was sexually harassed, but I didn't know the names of the staff at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church that walked in and witnessed us. And I certainly did not give the Domestic Relations Office permission to share my name and contact information with St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. And I didn't know that I didn't have any rights to decline that. Unfortunately, nobody informs me of that either. And why is it that the staff of the Domestic Relations Office at the supervised visits at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church, they're not usually wearing name tags, and the visiting parents and the custodial parents don't even know what their name is? So they're monitoring us and they're monitoring our kids, but we don't know who their name is. Usually, if you drop your child off at the school or the daycare, you know who is watching your child. You know their name, but we're not allowed to know their name. A prisoner at one of the state prisons, they know the names of the correctional officers. but we don't know the names of the church staff that come in. We don't know the names of the staff that are monitoring us at the supervised visitation. Why is that? Okay. Resident introduction. Invite resident to tell a little about themselves. What is their call story? Also, my next question is, does the staff of the domestic relations office know the name of the staff from the churches that walk into the supervised visitation? And if they do, then why are the parents not allowed to know? What is their call story? What is their understanding of the scope of the ministry in their current setting? What are their own perceived strengths and weaknesses starting out? What are they most concerned about? What are they most passionate about? Senior pastor feedback. Ask how the resident is adjusting to ministry, how he or she interacts with the staff, and any other relevant feedback. What is the resident's job description? What particular concerns does the senior pastor have? After reporting, senior pastor may leave the meeting. Working definition of clergy effectiveness, or KSAP. Choose either the KSAP or the working definition of clergy effectiveness. Go through whichever you choose with the candidate and ask him or her to discuss perceived strengths and growth areas. Begin moving the conversation toward areas the candidate would like to work on. These can either be strengths he or she wants to improve, or weaknesses he or she wants to address. Development growth plans. Identify the general areas of focus for the candidate and begin to come up with specific items. Remember, this is the personalized candidacy process for this person. If you want to include things like working at district camp, attending the gathering, attending the marriage retreat, etc., you can include them from here. Encourage the candidate to think through what learning they might gain from each activity and include it in the plan. There is a simple growth plan on the next page, a sample growth plan. Okay. This is about the system we're told to trust. For decades, the Texas Annual Conference has publicly presented itself as a place of ethical leadership. In their documents, the handbooks, the leadership standards, the training materials, they promise safe environments, ethical pastoral conduct, boundaries, accountability, mandatory reporting of misconduct, which they do not do. On paper, the policies look protective. On paper, they look like safeguards. On paper, they look like they would prevent abuse, but they do not. And the Texas Annual Conference did not follow them. They still do not. Not for me, not for others, not for decades. What happened to me? My assault wasn't an isolated event. incident. It was part of a problem, a long history of clergy using their authority to harm, and a conference choosing not to act. When I finally came forward as an adult, I hired an attorney, Harrison R. Fisher. In 2017, he contacted the bishop to notify the conference that I was filing a claim for sexual assault I endured from a United Methodist employee of the Texas Annual Conference within the United Methodist denomination. That notice should have triggered a process, a response, an investigation, a pastoral concern for a survivor. Instead, it triggered silence, insurance deflection, and avoidance. They said there was no coverage because the abuse happened before their policy period. To them, it wasn't about the trauma I carried for decades. It was about liability. Because to them, survivors of sexual assault are nothing more than an embarrassment and a liability. To the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Denomination, sexual assault survivors from their clergy or anyone within their administration or their congregations, the sexual assault survivors are nothing more than an embarrassment and a liability, and they want them out of there. It's a technicality to them, nothing more than a technicality. A way to sidestep responsibility. I'm going to go over the sample growth plan, which I'm sure is a load of shit, for the residency program handbook of 2023. The sample growth plan, this may be written out either by the RET convener or by the resident. Either way, make sure to email it to the entire RET as well as Eleanor Calvin. If there are any changes, misunderstandings, they should be taken care of then rather than waiting until the second meeting. Number one, the resident has understood that time management is an issue for him. The actual use of his Franklin Covey organizer has been suggested, and he has agreed to do so. 2, the resident feels inadequate in areas of pastoral care. To address this, he has agreed to read some suggested books by Kenneth Haig, or I can't pronounce it. It's Haugk. I guess I need one of their master's degrees. And perhaps attend Stephen ministry training if the possibility arises. The resident will also seek out opportunities to practice this kind of ministry in regular hospital and nursing home visits. The resident feels a lack of knowledge in administrative areas, specifically about how a United Methodist Church functions financially and legally. Boy, they have a lot of work to do on that one. In their minds, it's legal if you just cover it up really well. To address this, he will ask his senior pastor if he may attend trustees and finance meetings as an observer 4, the resident has been placed in charge of contacting new visitors to the church. He feels intimidated by this task as he is an introvert. It was suggested that he make a habit of making those contacts first thing each week, and he agreed this was the best way to go about addressing his insecurity. 5, the resident is worried about his tendency to neglect his personal health. He has agreed to work out 5 times a week and to work toward making this a lifelong practice. Okay. Another survivor, the pattern continues. My story wasn't the only one. Another survivor, represented by the same attorney, Harrison Fisher, described years of grooming and abuse by Pastor Kendall Graham, who was appointed by the Texas Annual Conference to multiple churches, trusted by families and empowered by the system. He groomed her from her childhood, just like my parents did. And other clergy that were employed under the Texas Conference Administration. It wasn't just my parents. And grooming is not always about sexual abuse. It is about power. It is about coercive control. He abused her through adolescence. He fathered a child with her. He lied to congregations about who she was. He continued preaching, counseling, and traveling on behalf of the church, all while living a double life. Letters went to the bishop, warnings were given, and yet nothing meaningful happened. The policies meant to protect vulnerable people were ignored. The ethical codes meant to restrict clergy behavior, unenforced. This was not a single failure. It was and still is a system-wide problem. Even when your own attorney fails you. But my betrayal didn't end with the church. The attorney who was supposed to protect me leaked confidential information. This was Harrison Fisher. He leaked confidential information into my file, revealing Jane Doe's identity, which was Alicia Provost Whitfield. And it was a violation that should never occur, especially in cases involving childhood sexual assault. And when I questioned him, when I demanded accountability, he retaliated. He weaponized my childhood trauma. Harrison Fisher weaponized my childhood trauma. Trauma I had survived inside the Texas Annual Conference, and used it against me. He warned me that the conference would tell the media and the public that I was mentally ill. A multi-billion-dollar administration that has a history of employing clergy who are capable of murder and sexual assault of minors would weaponize my own mental health against me and claim to be experts of my mental health by telling the media that I am mentally ill and in a cognitive decline, incapable of caring for our sons, because, of course, the Texas Annual Conference that has a history of employing sexual predators and clergy who are capable of murder would be experts on parenting, right? And that they would use whatever they could to discredit me. He framed it like a warning, but it felt like intimidation. I was confused. It felt like punishment for questioning him. It felt like yet another system protecting itself, that system being the Texas Annual Conference Administration with the United Methodist denomination, protecting itself instead of a survivor of sexual assault from one of their clergy, in an attempt to silence me. I was punished for surviving. False accusations were made against me, accusations with no truth, no evidence, no basis, but enough to cause devastating harm. I was ordered into supervised visitation with my own sons. There was no warning. There was no one indicated until the last day of trial. The last day of trial, the supervised visitation was ordered, and no one gave me a heads up. There was no evidence, no criminal evidence submitted. There is no history of arrest. At the time, there had not been a psychiatric hospitalization. I did put myself in. I went to a psych hospital for an evaluation, and I was there for 9 days of my own accord, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. But that was after I had visited my kids for months at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church that was under the Texas Annual Conference Administration that employed my father, who sexually assaulted me. I had not been given any warning that the judge was potentially going to order supervised visitation. That was on purpose to keep me quiet. Not because I had harmed our sons, not because I was unstable, because I was calm during the custody trial. My ex-husband was not calm, but I was calm. I was falling apart inside. I was not okay internally. But because attacking a survivor's credibility is the easiest way to silence her. And then came one of the cruelest blows. My supervised visits were ordered to take place. Well, the supervised visit started out at South Main Baptist Church. Out of the blue, I received an email, and I still have that email, where I was ordered by the domestic relations office, not the family court system. I was ordered to visit my kids by the domestic relations office of Harris County at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church on West 43rd Street, a church under the same administration, the same Texas Annual Conference administration of the United Methodist denomination that employed my father, a child molester, the man who abused me as a child my entire life. It makes me wonder if potentially the Texas Annual Conference is allowing these supervised visitations take place because they're looking for more victims, more children to exploit sexually. Imagine that. Imagine having to walk into a building connected to your abuser's employer just to see your children. What lesson was I supposed to learn from that? What is the lesson you are supposed to learn if you're visiting your children at a place that is associated with an administration that employed someone who sexually assaulted you as a child while you were drugged with a narcotic? Is it just to remind you you should have kept your damn mouth shut? Is that it? Or was it because the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist denomination felt I should have been cooperative and just spread my fucking legs as a child? Is that it? It was re-traumatization disguised as procedure. Imagine having to walk into a building connected to your abuser's employer just to see your children. Humiliation under supervision. Inside that church, visiting parents were treated like criminals, even if they did not have a criminal history. Even if they were forced into the supervised visitation program based on false accusations, which is against the law, you would think. We were monitored constantly, and employees from the Harris County Domestic Relations Office followed us even into the restrooms. They would stand inside the restroom just outside the stall, listening to us urinate or have a bowel movement on the toilet. Eventually, I walked in wearing cameras, and I got video footage of myself on the toilet because I couldn't take the cameras off because I was afraid I would drop them, and then I would have been totally screwed because it was a dangerous situation. The supervised visitation is not safe. But the Texas Annual Conference, if they really enjoy watching people on the toilet, they're more than welcome to watch that video. I would be happy to share it with them. You see, when you've been through decades of abuse and trauma, you become very calloused. There was no privacy, there was no dignity, there was no humanity. And this was at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church that was under the Texas Annual Conference administration. There are people who work on the administration. Elijah Stansel, one of them, who is well aware of this. Why? Because I talked to him. I told him. But he is a sitting cabinet member. He doesn't care. He has a comfortable salary. He doesn't have to worry about it. It's not his problem. It's not anything he's going to lose sleep over. That's for sure. And then the unthinkable happened. But I'm sure that the Texas Annual Conference will enjoy this part. I was sexually harassed by a visiting parent, another visiting parent at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. He was interested in me. And shocker, here's a shocker. I was there to visit my kids. I was not there to pick up a date. Now, I understand. It was assumed I would be okay with it since I was a veteran of repeated sexual assault. Could not even begin to tell you how many times I've been sexually assaulted. Don't know. But that's probably what it was. The Texas Annual Conference thought, hey, she's used to it. The staff of St. Stephen's United Methodist Church, they witnessed it as well. They called Shane. They asked him, why was he flirting with me? Why would they call him? Isn't that convenient? A woman who is a survivor of a United Methodist clergy, a survivor of sexual assault of a United Methodist clergy that was employed under the same administration that is over St. Stephen's United Methodist Church, is being sexually harassed at a supervised visitation right in front of the staff of the Domestic Relations Office and right in front of the staff of St. Stephen's United Methodist Church. And not a damn thing is done about it. My kids didn't know what was going on, but they didn't need to. I did. Why would I know? Probably because I was raised by a sexual predator. I could tell you if I were sitting next to one. When you've been around it enough, you just know. You can tell it by just looking in their eyes. And no one intervened. No one protected me. They witnessed it and did nothing. The same institution that failed me as a child stood by and allowed me to be violated again on the property of their church of St. Stephen's United Methodist Church in Houston, Texas, on West 43rd Street, in the presence of both of my sons and in the presence of other visiting parents. A system that fails in layers. When institutions fail survivors, they fail at every level. They fail in courtrooms, in churches, in legal offices, in visitation centers, and in the places where they should feel safest. Survivors are scrutinized instead of supported, punished instead of protected, humiliated instead of helped. My story is just not about clergy misconduct. It's not just about clergy misconduct. It is about the layers of failure, the overlapping systems that turned their backs on me and our sons. What survivors need and deserve. Survivors deserve transparency. We deserve ethical leadership. We deserve reporting procedures. We deserve reporting procedures that are actually enforced. We deserve protection, not retaliation. We deserve dignity, not humiliation. We deserve to be believed, not discredited. The Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist denomination claims to be a place of healing, a place of justice, a place of accountability. But justice cannot happen when survivors are silenced. Healing cannot begin when systems re-traumatize those they're supposed to protect. Healing cannot begin when systems re-traumatize those they are supposed to protect. Accountability means nothing when policies are ignored. I am sharing this out of hope. Hope that by exposing these failures, real change can begin. Hope that other survivors will not be silenced. Hope that institutions will choose integrity over image. Hope that the next child, the next parent, the next vulnerable person will finally be protected. Because silence protects the institution, but truth protects the vulnerable. And today I choose truth.